"You'll never walk again, son. I'm sorry." Those words echoed in Carter Wallace's mind like a cruel lullaby. Ever since the accident at age 6, he had learned to navigate life from a wheelchair, his once strong legs now nothing more than painful reminders of dreams he could no longer chase. Carter was 15 now, sharp-minded and deeply observant, but increasingly angry, withdrawn, and numb to the world. Despite the wealth surrounding him, his father's sprawling mansion in upstate New York, the best doctors, and top-tier tutors, he felt imprisoned. His body didn't listen to him, and worse, no one truly listened either. That was, until the new maid arrived. Her name was Loretta. No one expected anything remarkable from her. She was a middle-aged black woman with warm eyes and calloused hands, wearing a faded yellow blouse and gray flats the day she first walked through the Wallace mansion gates. To most, she was just another hired hand. Someone to keep the silver polished and the marble spotless. But Carter saw something different. Not at first, of course. At first, he ignored her like he did the others. They all came and went, anyway. Loretta wasn't hired through an agency. She came on a recommendation from a retired nurse who once worked for Carter's grandmother. Mr. Wallace, a steel-hearted businessman who rarely spent time at home, didn't care much who scrubbed the floors as long as it was done silently and swiftly. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Graves, took care of the details. Carter first noticed Loretta while sitting by the window, watching the late spring rain trace paths down the glass. She moved slowly but purposefully, humming as she dusted the antique bookshelf behind him. It wasn't the humming that caught his attention, it was the way she adjusted a crooked photo on the mantel. No one ever touched that picture. It was of Carter and his mother, smiling at the beach, taken a month before the accident. His mother had died that day. He remembered the sound of the crash more than her face now. "Please don't touch that," he snapped without looking at her. Loretta froze, hands still on the frame. Then she turned to him, calm as a still pond. "I didn't mean to offend. It just looked like it deserved to be upright, baby." No one had called him baby in years. Not since his mother. It wasn't condescending. It was soft, natural, motherly. It disarmed him in a way that made him uncomfortable. He turned his wheelchair and rolled away without another word. The next few days, Loretta remained invisible to everyone else but oddly visible to Carter. She moved through the house with a rhythm and energy that felt out of place among the quiet luxury. She noticed things others didn't. The way Carter winced when he tried to reach for a book. The way he stared out the window at the kids biking down the lane. The way he chewed the side of his cheek when frustration built up. She saw it all. And did nothing about it. No pity. No overreaching offers to help. She just hummed and dusted and made the house feel a little less like a museum. It was nearly 2 weeks later when the first real conversation happened. Carter had been left in the garden while his nurse took a phone call. The path was uneven in places, and his wheelchair bumped awkwardly over the flagstones. His lap blanket slipped to the ground, and try as he might, he couldn't reach it. He cursed under his breath, pounding a fist against the armrest. Loretta appeared beside him a moment later, silently picking up the blanket. "Why are you always around?" he muttered. "Because this house has a lot of corners that need cleaning," she replied, placing the blanket back on his lap. "And maybe you got some corners in you, too." He blinked at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everybody got corners, places too painful or dusty to touch. But ignoring them don't make them disappear." "You're not a therapist," he said. "Nope," she agreed. "But I raised 5 kids and buried 2. That teaches you more about pain than any book ever could." That was the first time Carter looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her. And Loretta just stood there, patient and present, like she had nowhere better to be. A week later, he asked her a question out of nowhere while she polished the hallway railing. Do you think people like me are broken? She paused, rag mid-wipe. What do you mean, people like you? Disabled. Weak. A burden. Loretta turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. I think people like you are strong in ways most others ain't never had to be. That's not really an answer, he said. It's the only one that matters, she replied, then went back to polishing. The days that followed felt different. Not because Loretta did anything dramatic, but because she didn't. She didn't pity him, didn't push him. But she did listen. When he had nightmares and shouted in the middle of the night, she was there before the nurse. She'd sit beside him silently, sometimes telling him stories about her childhood in Georgia or her grandson who loved dinosaurs. She spoke of hard times with softness, never as a victim, always with a kind of steady resolve. One afternoon, Carter asked if she ever believed in miracles. She was trimming flowers in the garden and looked up thoughtfully. I believe miracles don't always come like lightning. Sometimes they come like moss. Slow, quiet, and stubborn. That answer stuck with him. He started asking more questions. And Loretta, always gentle but honest, answered them all. One rainy day, Carter rolled into the parlor where Loretta was folding sheets. He sat for a while without speaking, then said, I used to want to run track. She looked up and met his eyes. What stopped you? His face twitched. A drunk driver. My legs were crushed. Loretta nodded slowly, folding another sheet. You still dream about running? Every night, he whispered. She didn't offer platitudes. She just asked, you ever tried moving them again? Carter looked down at his legs like they belonged to someone else. They told me not to bother. The nerve damage was too severe. Doctors know what they know. But you know what you feel, she said quietly. Have you felt anything? Even a little? He was silent, then, softly, sometimes I feel a tingle in my left foot. Like, a pinprick. Loretta set the sheets down and approached him carefully. Then it ain't over, baby. You hear me? If there's even a flicker, there's hope. Carter's voice cracked. Everyone gave up on me. Well, she said, kneeling to look him in the eyes, I haven't. Something shifted that day. Not overnight. Not in some cinematic montage. But piece by piece, inch by inch. Loretta began helping him with stretches. Not the way the nurse did, cold and clinical, but with care. She sang while doing it, old gospel hymns that wrapped around him like sunlight. When his legs trembled from effort, she never flinched. When he cried in frustration, she held space for it. I believe in you, she whispered once as he tried to twitch his foot. Even if nobody else does. That night, Carter dreamed he was running barefoot through a field of sunflowers. And when he woke up, something was different. He could feel his toes. Carter stared at his toes, frozen in disbelief. For a moment, he thought it was another dream. But no, he could feel them. Not clearly, not strongly, but undeniably. A dull awareness. A tingle. Something new, or maybe something returning after nearly a decade of silence. His fingers trembled as he reached down, brushing the tips of his socks. Loretta, he shouted, his voice echoing down the quiet hallways. She appeared faster than he'd ever seen her move, apron still dusted with flour from baking in the kitchen. What is it? You all right? I can feel them, he gasped, pointing down. My toes. I felt them. Loretta didn't say anything for a few seconds. She crouched down, gently removed his sock, and placed her warm hand over his foot. Which ones? She asked softly. The left foot. All of them. It's not much, but it's real. I swear it's real. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled, wide and tearful, and whispered, Thank you, Lord. And then she laughed, One of those deep, joyful laughs that seem to rise from the soul like music. "Baby, that's not nothing. That's everything." For the first time in years, Carter smiled back without faking it. That was the turning point. Something sparked between them, something deeper than caregiver and child. A bond. Trust. Hope. The next few weeks became a secret journey for the two of them. Carter insisted they not tell the nurse or his father yet. He wasn't ready for skepticism, for charts and medical debates and the coldness that usually followed good news. Loretta understood. Every morning, she helped him with small movements. She brought in old towels for resistance training, guided his legs with her hands, sang to him when the pain became sharp, and never let him quit, not once. Pain means something's still alive, she'd remind him. And if it's alive, it can change. Sometimes, she'd tell stories from her past. About picking cotton with her grandmother in the Georgia heat. About losing her eldest son to illness because the hospital refused to treat him in time. About carrying on anyway. Carter realized she was carrying a mountain of sorrow behind that soft voice, but she never let it weigh her down. Instead, she turned it into strength. And she gave that strength to him, piece by piece, without asking for anything in return. His muscles slowly began to awaken. Just small twitches at first. Then flexes. One afternoon, he managed to lift his left leg 2 inches off the cushion. It was the proudest moment of his life. But not everyone was happy. Mr. Wallace returned from an overseas trip and noticed something had changed. His son had color in his cheeks again, was sitting taller, speaking more. But instead of relief, Wallace responded with suspicion. "What's going on?" he asked Carter over dinner one evening. "You seem different." Carter shrugged. "Just been working harder, I guess." "With who?" Carter hesitated. "Loretta's been helping me with stretches." Mr. Wallace narrowed his eyes. "She's a maid, Carter. Not a physical therapist." "She believes in me," Carter said firmly. "That's more than I can say for anyone else in this house." His father scoffed. "Belief doesn't fix nerves. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak." Loretta walked in then, holding a tray of tea. She paused briefly at the tone but said nothing. Carter met his father's cold stare. "You've been gone more than you've been here. You don't know what I need." After that night, the tension in the house grew. Mr. Wallace pulled Mrs. Graves aside and instructed her to monitor Loretta more closely. He didn't like how attached his son had become. "We're not running a fantasy camp," he barked. "She's filling his head with false hope." But Carter didn't care. He continued working in secret. When the nurse wasn't around, Loretta helped him to the floor, guiding him through core-strengthening routines. She was careful, always watching his face for signs of pain or fear. And Carter never backed down. One day, while gripping the arms of a sturdy chair, Carter managed to shift his weight onto his knees. His upper body shook from the strain, sweat dripping down his face, but he held it, just for a moment. Loretta clapped her hands like a proud grandmother. "You did it, baby. You stood on your knees." His breath was shaky, but his voice was full of triumph. "I felt it. I actually felt it." She pressed a kiss to the top of his head and whispered, "I always knew you could." That night, he called her Mama L for the first time. It broke something open in her. Later that evening, she sat in her small servant's quarters, looking at a faded photo of her son, Isaiah, the one who had died at 11. He'd had cerebral palsy. And for years, she'd blamed herself. She hadn't been able to save him. But here, with Carter, it was like she had been given a second chance. But the joy didn't last. A week later, Mr. Wallace discovered the full extent of what had been happening behind his back. He saw Loretta holding Carter up in the therapy room on the surveillance system. His face turned red with rage. "This is unacceptable," he roared, slamming his office door so hard the glass shook. "You're not licensed. You're not trained. You've overstepped every boundary." Loretta stood quietly as he shouted, her hands folded calmly in front of her apron. "I'm trying to protect my son from false hope," he spat. "You don't know what you're doing." She raised her chin, not with defiance, but dignity. "I know what hope looks like. And I know what healing feels like. That boy is fighting harder than anyone in this house has ever fought for him. He could hurt himself. He's hurting already," she said softly. "From loneliness. From being told what he can't do. You gave up on him." "I didn't." Mr. Wallace's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Pack your things. You're fired." Carter was wheeling down the hall when he heard it. He rolled into the office just in time to see Loretta turning away. "Dad, no. You can't." "She's done here," Wallace said. "You don't get it. She's the only reason I'm getting better." Wallace shook his head. "You're getting better because your body is healing. That's not her doing." Carter's chest heaved. "You never believed in me." "She did. And she was right." Mr. Wallace pointed toward the door. "This conversation is over." Loretta looked at Carter, her eyes moist but calm. "You keep pushing, baby. Don't let anybody put out your fire. You're closer than you think." She placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezed gently, and walked out. It felt like the light had been sucked out of the house. Carter didn't eat that night. He didn't stretch. He just stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of abandonment all over again. But just before sleep took him, something stirred deep inside him. A memory. Loretta's voice. If there's even a flicker, there's hope. He woke up with a decision burning in his chest. He was going to walk again. And he was going to do it for her. The next morning, Carter wheeled himself into the therapy room, empty now without Loretta's humming in soft words. The air felt colder, the walls somehow further apart. But he didn't let that stop him. He parked his chair by the parallel bars, locked the wheels, and stared at them like they were the gates to something sacred. He took a deep breath. Then another. With trembling arms, he hoisted himself up. His legs shook, his arms burned, but he gritted his teeth and shifted his weight forward. His left foot moved, barely, awkwardly, but forward. Then the right. He gasped, then laughed through tears. "I did it, Mama L," he whispered. "I did it. It took 25 minutes to make it 5 feet. It took everything he had. But he did it again the next day. And the next. Each time, a little further. Eventually, the nurse noticed. She didn't say much at first, just watched. Then she started helping him properly, more than she ever had before. It was as if Loretta's presence had changed everyone, even in her absence. The doctors were called back in. Carter underwent new scans. His father stood stunned in the doorway as the neurologist flipped through reports, repeating words like unprecedented, delayed regeneration, and partial recovery possible. But Carter didn't care about the science. He just wanted Loretta back. He asked Mrs. Graves if she had her contact. She shook her head. She left without a word. No forwarding address. Said she didn't want to make it harder. He couldn't accept that. Not after everything. So, one afternoon, with the help of his physical therapist, Carter walked out the front door, across the driveway, and into the car. They drove into the city, to the old neighborhood the nurse mentioned Loretta once lived in. It took hours, asking neighbors, going door to door. No one knew where she had gone. Hope began to dim. Until a young girl with braids tugged at Carter's sleeve outside a corner market. "You lookin' for Miss Loretta?" His heart skipped. "Yes. Do you know her?" She's my grandma, the girl said proudly. She just moved in with us last week. Down the street. Come on. She led him to a small, neat duplex with white trim and sunflowers in the window. Carter stood at the steps, his knees weak from effort and emotion. Loretta opened the door. She froze when she saw him, her eyes wide, hand flying to her chest. Then she saw his legs. And the tears came. Slow. Silent. Sacred. He took 2 wobbly steps toward her. I told you I would. She reached for him, wrapping him in the strongest, softest hug he'd ever known. You did the impossible, she whispered, voice breaking. You walked. No, he said into her shoulder. We did. Later, over warm apple pie and laughter, they talked about everything. The therapy. His father's change of heart. The new doctors. And Carter made her a promise. I'm going to run one day, he said. And when I do, you better be at the finish line. Loretta smiled, touching his cheek. I'll be right there, baby. Cheering the loudest. And she was. A year later, at a local 5K charity run for spinal cord research, Carter Wallace crossed the finish line, slowly, shakily, but on his feet. People cheered. Cameras flashed. His father cried for the first time in decades. And at the very front of the crowd, hands clapping, eyes shining with joy and pride, was Loretta. The woman who did what doctors, therapists, and even his own father couldn't. The woman who believed in him when no one else did. The woman who did the impossible. And Carter never forgot her. For the rest of his life, when anyone asked what turned things around, he never said science or money or medicine. He always said the same thing. A maid named Loretta. She gave me back my legs, and my life.